You sent us hundreds of questions for Governor Kate Brown about the COVID vaccine rollout, so we squeezed in as many as we could in the 10-minute window we got with her.
We're one of few states that have put teachers in front of seniors. Do you regret that decision?
Look,
You could say people are getting a little bit desperate for the vaccine, like jumping out of bed in the middle of the night and showing up in your bathrobe desperate.
She called me at 11:30, was in bed. Mom, quickly!
And nope, we are still not letting up on the Oregon Republican Party's lies about the Capitol insurrection, or our GOP senators, who won't even return our emails. Maybe they went in the spam folder. Here's the story.
All right, got that Friday feeling. I'm Dan Haggerty. How you doing? Thanks for being with us. This is The Story. You got all the contact info at the bottom of your screen. Reach out, talk to us, use that hashtag #HeyDan. As you'll see, if you've watched the show before or you're watching for the first time, it steers the whole ship. We need to hear from you. So right now, this COVID vaccine is probably the most in-demand item in the entire world. It is the GameStop of life-saving injections. If you don't get that reference, I don't have time, not tonight. But it begs the question, what would you do to get life back to normal? Let me paint you a little picture. All right, let's say you're at home, you're relaxing, it's nighttime, you're in your PJs, maybe you're even asleep. Someone calls you and says you can get the vaccine as long as you rush over right away. Would you even put on shoes? And this happened in Seattle last night at like 11 o'clock. A freezer broke with about 1,600 doses inside. So medical staff scrambled to try and find people to vaccinate before the shots went bad. And this is what happened. All these people showed up. They put out a call on Twitter and like 900 people showed up in the middle of the night.
My wife came screaming down the stairs saying, "Did you see the news?" I hadn't. I was doing dishes. So she got on. We made the appointment, and we came.
She called me at 11:30, was in bed. Mom, quickly! The appointment is going to be at 1 o'clock. So he didn't have time to dress up, so I just came as, and we are here now. And we're done and go back to bed.
Yeah, they showed up in their bathrobes. So what? Easier access to the arm. Now, let's consider now an even more specifically strange situation that sounds even more comically impossible, like having someone offer you a vaccine while, I don't know, you're stranded in a blizzard, because this also happened this week down in Southern Oregon. A bunch of people got stranded on the highway to Grants Pass, including some healthcare workers who were taking vaccines to a clinic. They were so worried that those vaccines would expire that they started going car to car offering drivers the shots, and people took them. You throw in a decent podcast and suddenly, you know what, this traffic ain't that bad. Though, isn't it a little strange that we're envious of those people? I mean, the vaccine feels so out of reach for some of us that the idea of a stranger injecting your arm through a passenger window in a blizzard seems like luck. And we wanted to know what the governor thought about it. And that brings us to our big story tonight. So we asked you to send us your questions for Governor Brown about the vaccine, and you delivered big time. We got more than 1,000 just on Facebook, a ton more in our email and on Twitter. And we sent some of them with our Pat Doris, who got a 10-minute interview with the governor this morning, face to face, or more Zoom to Zoom, but you get it. We got a lot of questions like this one from Julie, after the Beaverton School District announced that they're not returning to in-person learning for months. Julie asked, how can Governor Brown justify teacher vaccinations before elderly when the school districts are in no rush to return to in-person learning, especially middle and high school? How does Governor Brown plan to respond to these districts? Here's what she told Pat Doris.
Well, Oregon, as you know, is a local control state. We have 197 school districts, and each one of these districts is different. It is my expectation, and I've been very clear with teachers, I've been very clear with superintendents and parents as well, that we have thrown every single tool that we have at the problem, including making sure that we have access to testing, making sure that schools have additional resources. As you know, the federal government passed, the Congress passed an additional package. So we have nearly $500 million coming to our schools to help ensure that they have the resources to purchase safety equipment and keep their staff and their students safe. So we're doing everything we can to make this happen.
Were you satisfied by that answer? Let me know. Use the hashtag #HeyDan. We also got some comments like this one from seniors, people who are upset that they can't get the vaccine, people like Steve who emailed us and said, it's pretty dark here under the bus. Pat read that email to Governor Brown, then asked her this.
We're one of few states that have put teachers in front of seniors. Do you regret that decision?
Look, we have put our most vulnerable seniors, those in nursing homes and assisted living, at the very top of the list. We have gone through and vaccinated every senior who's wanted a vaccine that lives in assisted living, that lives in congregate care and in skilled nursing. They're going to go back and do their second doses over the next couple of weeks. And then you will recall at the beginning of the pandemic, I was one of the first governors in the entire country to lock down our assisted living facilities and our nursing homes because I wanted to protect these most vulnerable seniors. And the good news is Oregon is faring much better than most of the states in terms of both our infection and our mortality rates, thanks in large part to the tough decisions and the incredible sacrifices that Oregonians have made. But we also need to take action to help the thousands of Oregon kids that haven't seen the inside of a classroom in nearly a year. Ask any parent or any grandparent or great aunt or great uncle. Distance learning is taking a real toll on our kids. Our kids are suffering from anxiety, depression. They need to see the inside of a classroom before the school year gets out, and that's what I'm committed to making happen.
Les sent this question about a story that we covered on the show yesterday. Les said, ask Governor Brown why all of a sudden the OHA is no longer releasing the ages of those who have died of COVID complications. Does she not want to know how many seniors age 65 and older are dying?
First of all, that's absolutely not the case. When I learned of the Oregon Health Authority's decision, I directed them to continue to provide both the death counts and the age brackets on a daily basis. We're actually, I believe, the only state in the country that is providing this level of information. And then moving forward, they will provide the more detailed information on a weekly basis. Honestly, they were struggling with making sure they had adequate staff to get this detailed information out. I told them that I will make sure they have the staffing resources to make this happen. I'm committed to transparency and making sure that the public and frankly the media has this information. It's really, really important for all of us to have.
Okay, let's bring in Pat Doris now, the reporter who did the interview for us today. And Pat, it sounds like the governor is changing the way that we're going to hear about COVID deaths once again. Did I hear that correctly?
Right. Well, I think that probably she was not involved in that first decision where OHA said we're not going to report the date that somebody gets COVID and then the date that somebody dies and their age. And she told me that when she heard about that, she said, hold on, fellas. Yes, you are going to report that. And then the compromise was, well, okay, we're only going to report it once a week, but it is going to be that level of detail that we have been getting now for 10 months.
Right. Interesting that she didn't seem to be too aggravated with some of the school districts that are deciding not to go back to school, considering Governor Brown's taken a lot of heat for prioritizing teachers over seniors. How did you think? Give me your impression of how she answered that question.
Well, I've interviewed the governor a bunch of times over the years, and she's a veteran politician. She's also, in person, she's not really confrontive and combative. She's very intellectual and sometimes can be somewhat wonky. So it's always interesting when you ask a direct question and then you don't get a direct answer. Like, I would expect that in her heart of hearts, and I don't really know this, so I would say in anybody's heart of hearts, if you carve out this entire policy and you get 700,000 people potentially angry at you for doing it, and then the people you're trying to help don't follow through and go with what your plan is, I would think that would infuriate you. But when I asked the governor that question, that's not what she said.
Yeah, considering that politicians and Governor Kate Brown, they can be pretty careful with their words in these situations. How did you feel like overall the interview went? And were there certain things that you left thinking you just weren't satisfied? You didn't get the answers you were hoping for?
Well, I think it goes back to that emotional reaction and what is the gut reaction and what's it like to be in that pressure cooker that she's living every single day. I mean, she's the chief exec of the entire government, and she's not literally doing everything because nobody could, and yet she's being held responsible and called on the carpet by the public for a lot of the things that are going wrong. I think it's great when politicians come out and are human beings and say, I am so angry about this, or I am so frustrated, or I am so excited. And the governor is great at going through the reasons that she thinks something should be done. Like, she was very good at talking through the points on why she made the decisions that she wanted to make. But she's not quite as comfortable as getting into now the reaction now that there's things kind of going sideways a little bit.
Right. I know what you mean. All right. Pat Doris, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure.
So, how is Oregon doing right now with the vaccines overall? If we look at the numbers, as far as throughout the state this afternoon, this is what we got. Nearly 315,000 people have gotten at least their first dose. Some people have gotten their second dose, but this number represents people who have gotten at least one. And that works out to be 7.5% of the state's population with at least the first round of the vaccine. We also got an update from the state on phase 1 healthcare workers. They're at least now 3/4 of the way through that 300 or 400,000 people in that group. So let's call it what it is, and that right now feels like that is at least some encouraging news. So a viewer told me that they've been getting some real MSNBC vibes from me this week, and I wanted to address that. Some people don't like the way that we've been covering the Oregon GOP and a referendum published by party leaders that's spreading misinformation and making our state, look kind of silly around the world. Now, I'm not just saying that to be dramatic. Publications in France were like, sacre bleu. Here's what happened. See, the Oregon GOP Executive Committee voted on a referendum that said basically the assault on the Capitol was a false flag operation meant to make President Trump and the Republicans look bad. Now, this is a total conspiracy theory that has been dispelled by the FBI, by more than 100 arrests and hundreds of open investigations into the actual perpetrators, Trump supporters, right-wing militants, white supremacists, and so on. But Bob sent me an email that said this. He said, Dan, I would like it if you would lay off the Republicans. You seem to be biased, and it causes my blood pressure to rise. The Republicans have been saying for 4 years that the stations like yours do not cover things the Democrats are doing, which are wrong. He then went on to explain some of the concerns he has with President Biden. Now, I get this vibe. I really do. There is a lot of liberal bias on some networks and lots of conservative bias on others. I hear this sort of thing all the time from viewers. I'll give you some examples. When I pressed the DA on his lax policies against protesters at riots, people wrote in and they called me a Trumper and a Fox News wannabe. Now, conversely, when I questioned, the police bureau on some of their tactics or, their use of tear gas in neighborhoods, things like that, people called me Dantifa. But in this case, Bob, I want to stress, I am not criticizing Republicans as a whole. Far from it. There are more than 700,000 registered Republicans in this state, and a lot of conservative independents. And I'm not pointing at you, Bob, or any specific person out there and making a point, unless you think the assault on the Capitol was a false flag operation. In that case, I'm trying to help you. First, by telling you the facts to dispel that conspiracy theory. Then, second, by explaining that some of your top officials in your party and the executive committee that represents you on a state and national scale are spreading that type of misinformation. They are using lies, either intentionally or out of ignorance, and that should concern you as a Republican and as an American. And lastly, I'm trying to introduce viewers, and maybe you, Bob, to a real dilemma happening in the Republican Party. There is a fracture in the GOP. The fissure is widening. And I want you to fully understand which side you are standing on and where the party is headed. Because if you talk to the political experts I know on the right, in a state like Oregon, where a minority party needs unity, focus, and growth, dividing itself over disproved false flag nonsense is a problem.
And I think that Republicans who are standing out against this realize it's a risk. They realize that there are probably constituents that do fall into this belief system, but they've also been elected to represent a set of ideals. And I'm proud of the Republican leaders who have come out and said, this is not something we align with, or we completely disagree with it, but that's risky to do. While you're in the minority, that means the elected leaders that we have, representing strongly Republican districts and strongly conservative districts. And I hope that this actually starts a conversation about where the Republican Party really needs to be focused and where they're going. The feedback that I've seen for folks who've come out to oppose this has been very positive, but it's going to continue to create a ripple effect of conversations about where Republicans want to go and what they're focused on.
Now, we've reached out to every Republican state lawmaker in Salem for a reaction. All House Republicans signed onto a statement saying there is no evidence that the Capitol siege was a false flag operation. 3 senators told us that they agree with that statement. 2 senators gave us kind of non-answers, Dallas Hurd and Dick Anderson. But we haven't heard back from 5 other senators: Fred Girod, Bill Hansel, Dennis Lithcom, Art Robinson, and Kim Thatcher. Maybe our requests are waiting in the spam folder. Bob just said right where they belong. Bob, come on. As always, I want to hear from all of you, and we are always listening truthfully, even when you have a problem with our coverage, especially when you have a problem with our coverage.
We love when you send us things, including trash. Pictures of trash. Don't send us actual garbage, but it did make us want to do a story on the mess downtown. And looks like Sam Adams is finally becoming his character from Portlandia, working for Ted Wheeler, not Kyle MacLachlan, when the story continues.
Welcome back. I was just reading some of your comments. I haven't seen any Fox News wannabe comments yet or Dantifa comments yet, but the night is young. Keep them coming. Use the hashtag HeyDan or email us at thestory@kgw.com. Little segue here, right? Because we are using a lot of what you have sent in to us every single night on this show, including this segment right here, because a ton of you helped us with this next one after we put a plea out on Facebook. And you sent us a bunch of trash, photos of trash. Don't send us actual garbage. See, videos and pictures of trash and graffiti all over Portland. It's proof, really, of what we already know to be true. But the causes of this problem are multifaceted and very complex. But when it comes down to it, the optics of our city could be worse than they ever have before. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Okay, for those that want to see what Portland is turning into, this is just by the PDX Portland Airport.
Portland is trashed. So trashed that when we put out a call on Facebook asking people to point us to the spots that frustrate them most, we got more tips than we could possibly follow up on.
Graffiti everywhere, people just hanging out, garbage everywhere.
This is Martin's video from Northeast 33rd by Marine Drive. This is Joshua's photo of the Goose Hollow roundabout in Southwest Portland. Darylyn sent us one of Southeast Foster near Laurelwood Park. This is from Jennifer at 136th and Powell. We also followed tips into inner Southeast Portland and got shots of the trash we've all seen driving along I-5. Finally, this video is from Dallas in downtown Portland. Let's start there, because business owners like Stacy Gibson say they're hanging on by a thread.
Absolutely. I do feel alone.
Gibson owns this Subway franchise on Southwest 6th Avenue. She also lives downtown, and she's over hearing excuses for why it looks like this.
Just dirty, out of control.
And a new study shows she's not alone. The nonprofit Clean and Safe published its annual Downtown Portland Business Survey this week. And in pretty much every category, business owners' confidence in downtown's economy is historically low. Specific to graffiti and vandalism, 73% say it's very much having an impact on business. And regarding overall cleanliness, 86% say downtown needs improvement. Gibson says that's putting it lightly.
The quantity of trash that you're seeing around in the areas is a little bit alarming. You just have no idea where it's coming from, what's in there, and what can be growing. I mean, it's, the rats, the different things that happen. And there's obviously a lot of tents and things like that, and the garbage just gets thrown outside.
And this is where we want to make a stark clarification, because when we talk about things like garbage and graffiti, other kind of bigger issues spring to mind. Things like homelessness and the racial justice protests recently. And everyone we talked to for this piece agrees those are common complex issues. They're going to take time to solve. But in the meantime, they say cleaning up garbage and graffiti should be easy, right?
You would think it would be, yes, definitely.
Okay, so we'll start with graffiti.
We're also out there entertaining thousands of requests.
Daniel McCardle-Jaimes is the spokesperson for the Office of Community and Civic Life, which cleans up graffiti in Portland. He says requests for service have gone up 300% in the last year. Their budget has not. Frankly, they're pretty much out of money.
And we're only halfway through our fiscal year. And so what we have done for our budget request for 21-22 is we have asked for $500,000 more dollars.
That will take months. In the meantime, the city is moving money from other programs to keep cleanups going. They're hoping that tides them over.
There is a priority in terms of how we go about doing this. Small businesses, residences, as well as nonprofit organizations.
Then there's the trash. One big factor, at the start of the pandemic, the city largely stopped clearing homeless camps. And officials have said when camps stay put for longer, trash tends to pile up. The city is starting to clear more camps now, and data shows crews are cleaning up more trash than ever. During the 2019-2020 fiscal year, crews contracted by the city cleared more than 3,200 tons of garbage off Portland streets. That's the largest total ever recorded. About halfway into this fiscal year, city crews have cleaned up nearly 1,800 tons of trash, meaning they're on track to surpass last year's number.
It's an absolute garbage pit.
Still, it's clearly not enough, and Portlanders, including our viewers, have noticed. Mayor Ted Wheeler addressed the frustration at a news conference this week.
And I want to be clear, this isn't just a downtown story. This is also the case throughout our neighborhood business districts and our industrial areas as well.
Speaking generally about livability issues, the mayor made 2 points. Number one, homelessness is a growing problem exacerbated by job losses amid the pandemic. In response, he says the city has opened hundreds of shelter beds and multiple organized camps in the last year. Number two, the mayor argued problems like trash and graffiti get worse when traditionally busy business districts are empty. In other words, he believes things will get better post-pandemic.
We have to make sure that we get the vaccinations out, that COVID is addressed. I've also been very clear that my top 3 priorities in this second term are safety, homelessness, and livability, all of which impact people's feelings about safety.
Okay, Maggie Vespa joining us now. For the people who wanted an immediate resolution, they're not going to get that. But you've been hearing from a lot of folks online who are looking for at least some ways to help.
Yeah, definitely. They wanted to know about kind of like organized volunteer efforts where they can help clean trash up. And a big one that we did want to point out, because we covered it before, is Solve Oregon. They organize massive trash pickups around the city and around the state. So we'll post their info and that of other resources in this story at kgw.com.
Sounds good. Maggie, thank you.
There's a new guy on Ted Wheeler's staff. Well, I guess he's kind of new-ish. Sam Adams, maybe you've heard of him. He's not exactly new to City Hall at all. Adams has been a figure in Portland politics for a very long time, and depending on how long you've lived here, you might remember him a little differently. Maybe you're the kind of person who is new here and you know him as the guy who finished third in a city council race last spring. Then the people can look back a little further than that and go, oh yeah, he was the mayor. That guy was the mayor. Adams was elected in 2009. He was the first openly gay mayor of a major city, and that was a really big deal. But he left office in 2012 after one term with some, let's call it baggage, to put it lightly. It involved a sex scandal with an intern. He didn't run for re-election. He worked for a few more years in Portland, then he moved to Washington, D.C. Then, after a former aide there accused him of harassment, which Adams denies, he lost his job there and moved back to Portland in 2019. When he joins Wheeler's team next week, Adams is going to be the Director of Strategic Innovations. He's going to work on policy goals for Wheeler's second term. And the Oregonian reports he's going to make a cool $110,000 a year. And as far as we can tell, this is like the first time I think a former mayor of Portland has ever worked for the current mayor of Portland. Now, Sam Adams has quite a bit of experience assisting Portland's mayors. I mean, he was the chief of staff for Vera Katz for more than a decade. And, well, I think maybe more or less of a resume booster, you could say, he was literally the assistant to the mayor on Portlandia. And I know a lot of you guys have some strong feelings about this show, but let's be honest, the city really is a parody of itself sometimes. And as they say, life imitates art. All right, we're going to finish the story right after this. It's Friday. I got the Friday feeling. I think we should end this week on a high note. So you remember 2 weeks ago, two Woodlawn elementary teachers, they were featured on the Today Show. NBC wanted to do a story on them after seeing our series Inside Woodlawn. Craig Melvin interviewed Lionel Clegg and Anthony Lowry about the lack of black teachers across the country and why representation matters. Well, it seems they hit a chord with America because people across the country started sending them letters and cards and packages to Woodlawn for the teachers. Some people sent simple thank you notes, which were wonderful. Other people were sending actual gifts.
I've had packages come from all over Baltimore, Maryland, Florida, New York. There's some from Seattle. There was a person from a book company that we talked about Ruby Bridges in that, Anthony did, and how we teach Ruby Bridges and talk about those things. But she sent us actually signed books from Ruby Bridges, the book that she has out that we actually read anyway in class. And so we now have a signed book from Ruby Bridges.
Special attention from the country there. It's really nice. Another woman actually sent inspirational books to the entire staff at Woodlawn called Be That Unicorn, which is really fitting because if you watch that interview on the Today Show, Mr. Lowry calls those two teachers both unicorns, which is pretty interesting, saying that it's very rare to see two black first grade male teachers. So really nice to see that. If you guys have more questions, send in more questions. We don't have a lot of time to get to them tonight. We had some people saying that they didn't quite feel satisfied with Governor Brown's responses to some of your questions, but we get to keep asking them. All right, this isn't a done deal. Keep using that hashtag HeyDan. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. The news at 6:30 is next.